SCHD is the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, and SCHG is the Schwab US Large Cap Growth ETF. And have you ever wondered why the older brother of SCHD, which is SCHG, why is that so overlooked? Why is everyone so obsessed with SCHD? Its younger little cousin. Actually, it's not a little cousin, it's got more assets under management, but it's a younger cousin. I recently became obsessed with the idea of why everyone is obsessed with SCHD and not SCHG. So as a guy who used to be a financial advisor, who has made probably close to 200 ETF videos on this channel, if not more, I am going to figure this out. And we're not just trying to figure out why SCHD is more popular, I'm going to tell you which one I think is better. And hint, I think you're gonna learn a few things. Now remember when I said that I've made probably close to 200 videos on this channel about ETFs? Well, it's always unsettling to me that I don't have some type of framework ranking system created for ETFs. As someone who has done this so many times, I've never structured it in a way that this ETF has to be number one no matter what. And this has pestered me more and more and more to the point where I decided to take a lot of time and develop something. So in this video, we are going to go through the framework I've created, the process that I've made to help rank ETFs. I'm gonna show you how that works with these two ETFs, and I went down even a crazier rabbit hole than spending weeks and weeks trying to develop this thing. I ended up spending months trying to create a web app that just does this for me. So I'm gonna show you how this web app works, how instead of doing all the work I'm about to show you, you can just click a few buttons and it's gonna all be done for you. So have you ever watched a decathlon? So with a decathlon, each event has its own rules. Long jump, shot put, high jump. So there's all these different events inside the decathlon. Now, just like each of those events has their own rules, so does my system. So for example, in expense ratio, I have set a rule that if you're a growth investor, less than 0.2% is fine for an expense ratio. So you don't get any points removed or any type of negative effect if the ETF has an expense less than 0.2%. And now here's the thing with the decathlon and with my ETF comparison tool. All these events, they add up into a score. The same thing happens with my tool, or we call it the methodology I'm using. So basically, let's say, like I said, an expense ratio is gonna get a certain amount of points. Dividend yield is gonna get a certain amount of points. We're gonna add all those points up and there's gonna be a score, just like in a decathlon. However, also in a decathlon, there is a similarity in that there's a weight to what event is more important. So the way I do this is if you're a growth investor, you have like the growth decathlon, where things like performance and risk, they're gonna have different weightings. And for example, performance is gonna be more important than with an income investor or someone who likes dividends. Of course, yield and dividend stability is on there in the, let's call it the income decathlon. So I've created these different weightings, just like in a decathlon. You add up the weights and eventually you get a winner. That's how this thing works. So I've created 8 different events that I care about. So you have the expense ratio, yield, the max drawdown, volatility, dividend stability, diversification, the size of the fund, and performance. So let's go through SCHD and SCHG's different individual scores for all of these different 8 things that we're talking about here. So we have expense ratio. SCHD is slightly higher than SCHG. Depending on what type of investor you are, this might not matter. They're so close. Huge difference, of course, in yield, where SCHD has a 3.74% yield, while SCHG only has a 0.36% yield. You're not buying SCHG for yield. You don't care about dividends if you're investing in a growth ETF like this. If you look at the max drawdown or how much the fund has fallen, we'll call it this line right here, the most from the top of the chart to when it stopped falling at the bottom, what was the maximum drawdown of that? So we can measure this from October 20th of 2011. And very interestingly, they have similar max drawdowns. So if you had held these ETFs around this time period, you would have also had a similar drawdown with both of these. Now, many of you probably would think that SCHD would have a much smaller max drawdown, but it doesn't, or it didn't back in the time when this was looking at, the periods that it's looking at. They're within about 1% of each other. Then we have the volatility, right? So the max drawdown is risk. Volatility is also part of risk. Now SCHD is way less volatile than SCHG is. 14.7% versus 21.4%. Dividend stability, which has its own kind of factor and information that I created, but we're not going to go into the details on this video, but 70% dividend stability for SCHD. SCHG has a 52% dividend stability. Again, SCHG not being a dividend ETF, you wouldn't care about that. So you wouldn't care about dividend stability in the ranking of SCHG. When it comes to diversification, this can be important, of course. Do they have enough stocks in them? SCHG has more, 230. SCHD has 103. Depending on the type of style investor you are, we have different weights on how much diversification you might want. Then the size or the assets under management. SCHD is bigger at 72 billion. SCHG having 49 billion, both really big funds. Looking at the returns, of course, SCHD doesn't have the returns that SCHG does. We're talking a 3-year return for SCHD of only 8.59%, SCHD being 28.47%, so a much higher 3-year rate of return. And then, it just continues. SCHG doing better over 5 years, almost 18% versus 11.3%. And over 10 years, SCHG also having an amazing return, 17.87% over 10 years, while SCHD has a great return as well, 11.97%, which anyone would be happy with, considering 10 years ago, people probably thought the market wasn't going to grow more than 3 or 4%. At least a lot of people were talking about that. And then to kind of show you just how big of a difference this is over a 10-year period, $10,000 would have grown to over $50,000 with SCHG. And with SCHD, you'd have just over $30,000, which also is not something to be unhappy about. So what we do is we take all these numbers and we add them up, right? Actually, not right, because that's not what we do. First, we say, what type of investor are you? So a growth investor will have a certain weighting of each of these factors, an income investor and then a passive investor. So I'm just going to show you the weights here of growth and income, because that's likely the type of investors you are looking at this type of ETF or comparing these two ETFs. So we take all the raw scores, we take the weights, we throw them together, and we get a number. Like I said, we have a growth number and we have an income number. So of course, if you're a growth investor, this is going to show you that SCHG has a better rank than SCHD does. But then if you're an income investor, it actually flips. SCHD ends up having a better score than SCHG. To answer the question why SCHG is not as loved as SCHD, we're going to go to the web app that I've made. So let's open that up. So this is ETF Compare. I'll be showing you how to get access to this later for free. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with growth. I'm going to put the two ETFs, SCHD, hit enter, SCHG, hit enter. I'm going to hit compare. This web app's going to do its magic. All this calculation that I did, all those things that I just showed you, instead of putting them all into an Excel spreadsheet, a Google Doc, you just put them, you go here, boom, it's done. So being a growth investor, which I've picked at the top, it shows the ranking of SCHG, of course, being better than SCHD. So yes, if you're a growth investor, SCHG is likely going to be a better ETF. Use this as a guide. Eventually, I'm going to make this more customizable so that you can actually put in your weightings that you want. But for now, we just have these 3 different types: passive, growth, and income. So now we go back, we say, okay, what if I'm an income investor? What happens? Okay, SCHD is number 1, and SCHG doesn't even qualify to be ranked here. And the reason is it has to have a yield of at least 2% and a stability score of 55% or higher. We also have a snapshot with a bunch of stuff down here and a score breakdown, but what I want to show you, and here's the reason why I think SCHG doesn't get the love SCHD does. I'm going to put in some other popular income funds. So I'm going to type in VYM, QILD, DGR, DGRW, and OBL. I hit compare, it does its thing, and what do the rankings show? Hey, on these pretty popular dividend ETFs, SCHD is the winner across all of them. It has number 2 is VYM, number 3 is QILD, and it doesn't show rankings for DGRO or Noble. And the reason is they don't even meet the yield requirements for income. So I have a 2% yield requirement here. DGRO has a yield of 1.41%. Noble has a yield of 2.05%. However, it doesn't hit the dividend stability score that we want of 55%. So I'm not ranking it. If you look at the 10-year return with SCHD having 11.97%, it's higher than all of these other ones, with the exception of DGRO, which actually, like I was saying, it doesn't have high yield. So out of these pretty popular income ETFs, SCHD is winning. One of the reasons why I think SCHD is the ETF that has a cult following. It's a great ETF. It does compare very well against other ETFs in the income category. But then when we go over to the growth category, things get a bit different with SCHG. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare SCHG to VOO. I hit compare. VOO is the S&P 500 Vanguard ETF. It tracks the general S&P 500 index. And what you're going to see, SCHG has a better score than VOO. Now you're probably wondering, okay, well, SCHG looks pretty good. Why not the cult following? Let's keep going. Let's go with VOOG. Compare. VOOG is like the growth part, the growth section of the S&P 500, VOO. SCHG still on top. Why not the cult following? I'm waiting for the cult following here. What's going on? Here, let's type in triple Q, the NASDAQ 100 ETF. Tracks the top 100 largest stocks in the NASDAQ and very tech-heavy sectors. See, now we get triple Q pulling ahead of SCHG. Even SCHG being a really great large cap ETF, when you look at these ETFs like triple Q, it doesn't look as good. And that's kind of what I think is happening here. SCHG performs in everything in the income category amazingly. SCHG, on the other hand, it performs amazing against most of the other ETFs and just the general growth, large cap growth. But when you throw in things like triple Q, or if we type in VGT here, which is the Vanguard Tech Sector ETF, that's even better than triple Q on this thing. So if you're going for strict growth, this is ranking VGT. Now, VGT is a sector ETF, and we're going to have to talk about sector ETFs sometime in the future. For now, I wouldn't say that this is something everyone would want to look at because it is just based on one sector, and you need to make a decision on the sector if you're going to invest in something like VGT. But I just wanted to show you and illustrate why this is happening. SCHG, great ETF. Really good in the large cap category, large cap growth ETFs. But when you throw in those triple Qs, when you throw in things like tech, and you compare it, it's just hard to compete. So, you want access to this? You want to check it out? Take a look in the description below. There's a link. Come back here, give me some feedback, tell me if you like it. I'm working on more solutions like this, more technology that will help you, hopefully, make better decisions investing. Because at the end of the day, what I feel is that buying ETFs can be just as rewarding and as satisfying as investing in individual stocks. Things like this tool and other tools that I'm going to be working on here, I think they're going to help maybe get you more excited about investing in ETFs. And hopefully this channel going forward will help you get more excited about ETFs as well, and index funds.